Hey everyone, it's Kenji. We're gonna braise some chicken thighs with cabbage and bacon and potatoes. Kind of an all-in-one pot meal. This is based on a recipe I've done for Serious Eats. I'll link to it below. I'm gonna make it a little different because this one I'm adding some potatoes and I'm kind of eyeballing everything instead of measuring. But first things first, I got a oven-safe pan here. I'm gonna heat it up over high heat and I'm gonna sear my chicken off. And then I've got an oven ready for it when it's gonna braise. So this technique works really well for dark meat chicken. I'm doing it with cabbage and potatoes, but it really works well with a variety of flavors. So you could do this with like tomatoes and capers and olives as the flavor base instead of onions and potatoes. You could do it with fennel. You could do it with kale. You could do it with carrots. You can do it with any number of sort of vegetables and liquids. And the idea here is that we're going to, you'll see as we go, but what we're going to do is we're going to brown the chicken, dark meat chicken, skin on, bone in. We're going to brown the chicken in the pan, and then we're going to build up a flavorful sort of stew base underneath it. And then we're going to put the chicken back in with the brown crispy skin on top. And that way, as it cooks, the meat kind of slow cooks in a moist environment underneath, whereas the skin stays above and gets extra dark and crispy and delicious. All right, so I've got salt on there. This was this kind of meal was something that was super common when I was a cook. Making something like this for family meal was always really good because dark meat chicken is cheap, and usually we had chickens we broke down and we would use the breasts and serve them on the menu, but oftentimes more people would order chicken breast than leg meat, and so we'd end up with a lot of leg meat, and so that's a good option for family meal, staff meal. Family meal is what we call the meal that you cook for all the other cooks in the front of the house and everybody who works in the restaurant. And then you could use whatever sort of vegetables you had in the walk-in. Oh. Hold on 1 second. Where were we? Sorry about that. That was my kid coming home from a walk. All right, so I got our chicken. My pan is preheated. You can see that oil. This is just rice bran oil. You can any kind of neutral oil is fine, but I'm going in skin side down, and you want to hear that real nice sizzle right when you go in. Because that's what's going to keep the chicken from kind of fusing to the bottom of the pan. What can happen with chicken and other kind of tender proteins is that if you slowly heat up the chicken in the fat, or if there's no fat at all and you're just going bare metal, what happens is that the chicken can actually form chemical bonds with the metal in that pan that make it virtually impossible to get it off without having to really get in there and scrape. So without completely messing up the chicken, it's going to become virtually impossible to get off. That's why you always want to preheat your pan and have at least a little layer of fat in there, because then what happens is, as the chicken is being lowered into that pan, that layer of fat is hot enough that it gets the portion of the skin that's going to touch the pan. It gets it cooking right away, so that the proteins in it then do not stick to the pan as they cook. And so they're still going to stick a little bit, but they're not going to form those really intense chemical bonds that you would get from putting it into a cold pan or into a pan with no oil in it at all. So what we're going to do is we're just going to let this sit here. Let me season the other side with pepper. I missed that side. We're just going to let this sit here until it is nice and brown. At this temperature, it's going to take around probably 8 minutes or so, 6 to 8 minutes. So in the meantime, I will begin getting my other ingredients ready. So I got a little bacon. Use about that much. If I had slab bacon, I would use it, but I don't, so I'm not. I would cut it into nice big chunks, but I got this kind of thick cut stuff, which will work just fine. Even nice and chunky like that. Okay. I'll go with some cabbage. Using green cabbage, you can use any kind of cabbage you'd like. Savoy, white cabbage, Napa cabbage, or something like kale or collard greens would also work. We're gonna shred it. It doesn't have to be like super fine. In fact, it could even stay completely chunky if you prefer it that way. It doesn't really matter. They'll all cook just the same. It's just a matter of personal taste, really. Oh, I think I was saying that in a restaurant, this is great because not only is the meat itself really inexpensive, it's also something that lets you use up, you know, whatever you happen to find in the walk-in. So if you got that, you know, that case of cabbage that's starting to go off, use it. If you got like cans of tomatoes in the pantry, use those. So, I mean, of course, that also makes it good for a home setting. All right, we got our cabbage. I'm gonna go with an onion here. One of these days I'll do a, been thinking about doing like a knife skills series. I have this really old knife skills series on Series Eats. There might even be some videos on my YouTube channel here, but a very old series that is not shot in a particularly useful way, I think. It looks old. So I was thinking of doing a new series with a few different cameras and basically just one long video showing you how to cut like virtually every vegetable into whatever shape you want, and then timestamp it so that you can jump to wherever you want. I don't know why I haven't done it yet, but basically I'd just stand here chopping things for like an hour and, you know, relive my old restaurant days where I used to just, I don't know, anybody who's worked in a restaurant, garde manger, you know, the first station you work at in a restaurant can tell you that a large bulk of your time, hours a day, is spent just cutting things. Chopping vegetables for stock, preparing vegetables for salads. Just all kinds of cutting over and over and over. And a little too dark there, but that's all right. I've been yakking too much. It's okay, we're still at the dark brown phase, which is, as long as we're dark brown and not black, everything's a-okay. Alright, let's brown that second side a little. So you saw how once the chicken was sort of ready, you know, that once the skin was crispy, it pops right up easily off the pan. I didn't really have to get under there or scrape it or anything. Alright, I also got some parsley. I'm going to use that to finish it. I'm just getting all my ingredients ready right now, so I don't have to worry about it when things start cooking. That's another thing you kind of learn, I think, as you progress as a cook, and especially, you know, working in restaurants, to think like about how you would design like a machine to do something like this, and so what's the most efficient way to do things. And usually that means specializing in specific tasks, you know, doing certain tasks first. So doing all of your chopping and cutting first, having everything ready, then doing all of your cooking. In this case, you know, I know my chicken's going to take some amount of time, so I'm taking that opportunity to chop my other ingredients. But even things that I'm not going to use until the end of the dish, like the parsley, I'm chopping now, so that it'll be ready by the time the dish is. And I've got some of these Yukon Gold potatoes. You can use whatever potatoes you like, or no potatoes. Just cutting them a little chunky here. It also means like that efficiency thing. If I'm chopping like a whole ton of onions, what I would do is I would first chop the ends off of every onion, then I would split every onion down the middle, and then I would peel every onion, and then I would come back and start slicing every onion. I wouldn't work one onion at a time. I would do all the onion before moving on, all of one step before moving on to the next. All right, get that chicken out of here. A little bit too dark, we'll just a little scrapey. Luckily, my family's more forgiving than a chef. All right, get our bacon going in there. The only exception to that, do everything, or the main exception I can think of to that, do everything all at once for efficiency rule is cleaning. You don't save all the cleaning for the end. Clean as you go, because it's really hard to work in a dirty environment. I'm gonna turn on this fan for a bit. I hope the sound doesn't mess up the audio here. All right, once the bacon's a little bit brown like that, we don't need to worry about it getting crispy or anything since we're gonna be braising it. We want a little bit of browning for flavor. I'm gonna go in there with my onions. And we're gonna let those sweat out for just a moment. I'm gonna let these cook down until they're just starting to brown around the edges. That's probably, at this heat, that'll probably take 5 or 6 minutes. So I will be back. I'm not gonna make you watch it. I'll be back in a few minutes. I don't know exactly how long, 3 or 4 minutes actually. I always forget this one particular burner is hotter. I usually use that burner. I don't know. Do I usually use it? But anyhow, this burner is the hottest one by far. So things go a little faster here. All right, so my onions are brown. I'm not going for like a deep caramelization, just some nice light browning on there. So now I'm gonna go in with my cabbage. I'm really gonna go for that sort of same thing with the cabbage. I want it to soften and just start to brown a little around the edges. You get a little bit of that nutty, sweet brown cabbage flavor, which I love so. So at the beginning, you can see I'm kind of trying to get under there and fold the onions and bacon that are at the bottom up, over, and through the cabbage. That way it doesn't just sit there and burn. I'm also trying to do a little bit of scraping so that any juices that are coming out of the cabbage will be used to kind of deglaze, that is, dissolve the brown bits that have stuck to the bottom of the pan. So really, as always with a stew or a braise like this, you're building flavor. So you're browning everything, you're scraping up the bottom, getting that flavor nicely distributed, building up another layer of flavor, etc., etc. And you'll see the cabbage pretty quickly starts to wilt and break down. You might also notice I haven't really added too much salt to this yet. I seasoned the chicken, but I haven't added much other salt in here, and that's because the bacon's a little salty. I'm using store-bought stock for this, so that's going to be a little bit, even the low sodium stuff has some salt in it, and it's going to be reducing, so that salt is going to concentrate. And the salt from the chicken is also going to be getting into the braising liquid as it cooks and reducing, so I probably don't need to add too much salt to here, but I will salt it at the very end once everything is done and I taste it again. But as a general rule of thumb, when you've got other salty ingredients in a dish that's going to be braised, simmered, a soup, anything that's going to reduce in volume as it cooks, go easy on the salt, because you can always add salt at the end, but you can't take it out if it over-concentrates. All right, so again, I'm gonna let this go for a couple more minutes. I won't make you watch it, but I'll be back in a couple minutes. All right, so our cabbage is wilted, nicely brown, smells delicious in here, really nice and nutty. Bacon and cabbage, yum. All right, so I'm gonna finish this off. I'll get my potatoes in there. Store-bought chicken stock. I had about half a carton left. It's about 2 cups. I might actually add a little bit more. Actually have some homemade stock as well. This is a roasted chicken stock. So I'll add like maybe 1 more cup. So 3 cups of stock total. Stir that so everything's nicely distributed. These potatoes are going to cook. Make sure the potatoes are going to cook. I'm going to actually stir in some thyme and rosemary sprigs as well. As usual, I'm going to leave the fishing of the twigs, the stems out to up to future me to deal with. All right, now we get our chicken back in. So we're going to nestle this so the skin stays out, but everything else is kind of submerged. Okay, kind of Tetris it all into place. Tetris is an old video game. Do people still know what Tetris is? I assume they do, right? I assume you know what Tetris is. It's not all just like, what is it these days? Minecraft or... I don't know. I don't know what games people play. I play single player games. I don't know any of the internet games. Alright. Oh, let's not forget our juices. Okay, there we go. So I'm at a 375 degree oven. I do have convection on right now, but I'll probably turn it off at some point because that chicken skin, as you saw, is already quite dark, and I don't want it to get too dark and start burning. And actually, I'll turn it off right now. We'll just go with regular baking. I don't want it to get too dark because you know, convection is basically just a fan that circulates hot air around. So what it ends up doing is it browns things all over much more evenly than just heat from the bottom or heat from the back, or however your oven tends to heat. Adding that moving air really helps things brown. It's actually how, you know, like an air fryer works. It just has a really powerful fan that forces air to move around. It's essentially just a small convection oven. So if my chicken was a little bit paler than that, I would have kept the convection on, but because it's dark, I'm not. 375, it'll probably take, I don't know, 30, 45 minutes or so for the chicken to all be tender. So I will come back when it's ready. All right, so I'll see you in some amount of time. I can't remember exactly how much. Maybe it's been 40 minutes or so. So I actually reduced the oven temperature down a little bit to 350 because I looked at the recipe and I was like, oh, my old recipe said 350. But it doesn't matter too much. All that really matters is that you want that liquid to be very, very gently simmering. The more gentle, the more juicy the chicken's going to come out. But you want it to be simmering. Oh, hold on a second. Some people are home. Just a second. Sorry about that. That was my daughter coming home from this dentist. All right, so you see the chicken is done, and it's crispy on top and juicy on the bottom. I'm going to carefully take it out of here so I can get a look at the broth underneath and season it as necessary or reduce it as necessary. Now, in the recipe that I have published for this, I suggest adding a couple tablespoons of butter to this broth at the end, which definitely think you should do if you want to. I'm going to skip it just because currently my wife is not eating any dairy. So we're going to skip the butter, but it'll be delicious even without it. Oh, and the other thing you can see, you know, I talked about the importance of cleaning as you go. You can see while this chicken was braising, I cleaned the entire kitchen. So I sanitized the whole stove top. I cleaned everything. I cleaned all the cutting boards, everything, all the pots and pans, everything that I've used before. Actually, no pots and pans because this is a one-pot dish. But cleaning as you go, that way you don't have to clean at the end or you don't have to clean after dinner. I don't like cleaning. I like leaving after dinner cleaning as minimal as possible. All right, let's see if those potatoes are tender. Yep, they are. I'll leave those thyme and rosemary sprigs in there and just let whoever is eating pick them out themselves. Okay, so this can definitely use a little bit of salt, not too much though. And I'm also gonna splash in a little bit of vinegar. This is apple cider vinegar, just to kind of bump up that brightness. You could use any kind of vinegar you want, or something like lemon juice would work also. As I was mentioning before, so the lower the temperature that you go at, as long as it's at a bare simmer, the lower temperature you go at, the longer it'll take for the chicken to fully tenderize, but also the juicier the chicken will be at the end. So if you're in a hurry, you can blast it at 400 or so, and just make sure your chicken skin doesn't burn, but your chicken will get done really fast. It won't be quite as tender and juicy as when we do it like this at a lower temperature, but it'll still be plenty good. That's great. Okay. If you wanted to, you could also add a little bit of sugar to here. Give it a sort of sweet and sour thing going on, but I'm not going to today. Some of that parsley. And then I'm going to serve this. I would serve this directly out of the pot like this. Just nestle the chicken right back in. No need to mess up another plate. That's the beauty of these sort of one-pot meals. Not much to clean when you're done. Finish off with another little sprinkle of parsley on top. I think that looks pretty good, huh? Let me get a little bowl and try some for myself. Yeah, you're gonna get some too, Humble, don't worry. You can, of course, if you don't want it this like brothy, I kind of like it brothy, serve it with a spoon. If you don't want it this brothy, you can, of course, take the chicken out, put it on the stovetop, bring it to a simmer, and just let it reduce until it's, as dry as you'd like it. Let's see how the chicken came out. Oh yeah, you see how nice and crispy it is? Yeah, delicious. Shabu. Here. You guys want to try some? Go on. Good boy. Sit, Shabu. Good girl. All right, I will link to the recipe below. And guys, gals, non-binary pals, until then, I'll see you later. Bye-bye.